The scorching Enugu sun beat down mercilessly on the corrugated iron roofs of Ogbet Main Market, turning the bustling marketplace into a furnace of noise, sweat, and desperation. Amidst the cacophony of haggling traders and the pungent aroma of dried fish and fresh peppers, a young man pushed his wooden barrow through the narrow pathways, his lean frame bent under the weight of someone else's goods. His name was Okolo Mbanusi, and at 24 years old, he had already tasted more rejection than most people experience in a lifetime. Barrow pusher. The call rang out from a yam seller, her voice cutting through the market noise like a blade. Okolo quickly maneuvered his barrow toward her stall, his worn-out slippers slapping against the uneven concrete ground. Without a word, he began loading the heavy tubers onto his barrow, his muscles straining under the weight. This was his life now since 2017, when the economic downturn had squeezed Nigeria like a vice, leaving young men like him scrambling for any honest way to survive. But Okolo Mbanusi had not always been a barrow pusher. 3 years earlier he had dreams of going to university, of becoming somebody, of lifting his family out of the grinding poverty that had defined their existence for as long as he could remember. His father, Papa Okolo, was a bricklayer whose calloused hands built beautiful houses for other people, while his own family lived in a single room with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors' conversations as clearly as if they were in the same room. His mother, Mama Okolo, sold vegetables in a corner of this very market. Every morning she would wake up at 4 o'clock, trek to the wholesale section to buy her stock, and spend the entire day sitting on a low stool, begging customers to buy from her, instead of the dozens of other women selling the exact same tomatoes, the exact same onions, the exact same peppers. On good days she made enough to buy Gary for dinner. On bad days the family went to bed with only water in their bellies. This was the world Okolo was born into. A world where poverty wasn't just about lacking money. It was about lacking dignity, lacking hope, lacking the simple human right to dream without fear. "Move faster, young man. I don't have all day." The yam seller's impatient voice jolted Okolo back to the present. He quickened his pace, loading the last of the tubers and gripping the wooden handles of his barrow. The destination was 3 streets away, past the fabric section, through the spare parts area, all the way to the roadside where the woman's customer was waiting. As he pushed, ignoring the burning sensation in his shoulders, Okolo's mind wandered to the previous night's dinner, or rather, the lack of it. His mother had stood in their tiny kitchen, staring at an empty pot with tears streaming down her face. They owed money to virtually everyone on their street. The woman who sold kerosene, the man who ground their pepper, even the young boy who fetched water, they all avoided the Mbanusi family because of unpaid debts. "We will eat tomorrow," his father had said with a conviction that seemed to come from nowhere. God will provide, but Okolo knew better than to wait on miracles. That was why, despite the shame, despite the way people looked at him with pity or disgust, he pushed his barrow. That was why he endured the insults, the casual cruelty of customers who treated him like he was less than human. Every 20 naira note, every 50 naira coin, it all went into a small tin he kept hidden under his sleeping mat. Money for food, money for his mother's high blood pressure medication, money to slowly, painfully, climb out of the pit they had fallen into. The barrow wheels squeaked as Okolo navigated around a pothole filled with murky water. A group of young men his age stood nearby, well-dressed in designer jeans and crisp shirts, laughing and talking loudly about their latest business deals. One of them noticed Okolo and nudged his friend, whispering something that made them all burst into laughter. Okolo kept his head down and kept pushing. He had learned not to let shame paralyze him. What was shame compared to his mother's tears? What was embarrassment compared to his father's bowed shoulders after another day of finding no work? Pride was a luxury for people who could afford it. Okolo Mbanusi could not. After delivering the yams and collecting his meager fee of 100% naira, Okolo made his way back to the main market area. It was barely noon, and already he felt exhausted. But he couldn't rest. Rest meant no money meant no food. It was that simple, that brutal. As he positioned his barrow near the entrance, hoping to catch customers arriving with heavy loads, Okolo noticed something he had seen 100 times before but never really paid attention to: a large banner hanging at one of the provision stores. Onga Promotion, Collect and Win. The bright red and white banner featured images of mobile phones, cash prizes, and other rewards. Okolo had seen such promotions before. They were for other people. Lucky people. People whose lives weren't defined by struggle. Why would someone like him, a barrow pusher with nothing, ever win anything? He turned away from the banner, ready to dismiss it from his mind entirely. "Barrow, I need a barrow here." Okolo's head snapped toward the voice. An elderly woman stood surrounded by bags of rice, beans, and various provisions. He hurried over, and as he loaded her goods, he couldn't help but notice the dozens of small onga seasoning sachets spilling from one of her bags. "Be careful with those," she scolded. "My daughter needs them for her restaurant." Okolo carefully gathered the scattered sachets, and as he held them in his palm, his eyes drifted back to that banner. Collect and win. How many of these sachets did people throw away every day? How many ended up in the gutters, in the trash heaps, discarded without a second thought? An idea began to form in his mind, small and fragile as a seed, but an idea nonetheless. What if? He shook his head, dismissing the thought as quickly as it had come. False hope was more dangerous than no hope at all. He had learned that lesson many times over. Better to focus on what was real, the barrow, the customers, the daily grind of survival. But as he pushed the elderly woman's goods to her destination, weaving through the crowded market paths, Okolo couldn't stop thinking about that banner. Couldn't stop wondering if maybe, just maybe, fortune might smile on someone like him. That evening, as the sun began its descent and the market started to wind down, Okolo counted his earnings for the day. 350 naira. Barely enough for a cup of rice and some stew. He sighed, pocketing the wrinkled notes, and began the long walk home. His route took him past mounds of garbage that accumulated at the market's edges, and there, among the discarded pure water sachets, the torn cartons, and the rotting vegetables, he saw them, onga seasoning sachets, dozens of them, empty ones that had been tossed away after use. Okolo stopped walking. He looked around to see if anyone was watching, then bent down and picked up one of the sachets. The promotion details were printed right there on the back. Collect 50 sachets and redeem for exciting prizes. 50 sachets. He looked at the garbage heap. He could see at least 10 sachets just in this one pile. The food sellers in the market used onga constantly. The sachets were everywhere, treated as worthless trash. But what if they weren't worthless? What if they were tickets to something better? Okolo Mbanusi made a decision that would change his life forever. He began to collect the sachets. One by one, he picked them up, wiping off the dirt, flattening them carefully, and tucking them into his pocket. People walking by stared at him strangely. A woman muttered something about him losing his mind, but Okolo didn't care. He had spent years caring about what people thought, and where had it gotten him? Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. By the time he reached home that night, he had collected 23 sachets. His mother was cooking the small portion of rice he had given her money for. His father sat on their only chair, staring at the wall with that distant look that came from a lifetime of disappointment. Neither of them asked about the sachets Okolo laid carefully on the floor in the corner of their room. They had stopped asking about his dreams long ago. But as Okolo lay down that night on his thin mat, staring at the ceiling with its water stains and cracks, he allowed himself something he hadn't permitted in years: hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of a drowning man, but a quiet, determined hope. The hope that came from taking action, however small, however unlikely to succeed. Tomorrow he would push his barrow again. Tomorrow he would endure the stares and the insults again. But tomorrow he would also collect more sachets, because Okolo Mbanusi had decided that poverty would not be his final destination. He didn't know how, and he didn't know when, but somehow, some way, he was going to change his story. And it would begin with 50 small sachets of onga seasoning that everyone else had thrown away as garbage. The journey had begun.